So if you don't know her yet, Briahna Joy Gray is the national press secretary for Bernie Sanders' 2020 presidential campaign, and she recently got into a bit of hot water with a bunch of establishment Democrats over a tweet responding to Kamala Harris, in which Kamala Harris said that testing for coronavirus and treatment needs to be free. Obviously, the current plan only has testing to be free. Kamala Harris, making the claim that treatment also needs to be free. Well, Briahna Joy Gray, as you can see here, responded saying that this is a good start, but is it really okay for people to die from cancer and diabetes because they are poor? Well, so she got into a bit of hot water over this, and the responses, at least initially, you're going to see how the responses sort of evolved throughout the day. But the initial response was basically to say that this tweet is in bad taste because Kamala Harris's mother died from cancer, and so you're not actually able to advocate for Medicare-for-All in that way. Zerlina Maxwell also making a similar point here, saying that the tone of the tweet is mean and disrespectful, especially considering that Kamala Harris's mother died from cancer. Then, as the day went on, the tweets sort of started to evolve a little bit. Bakari Sellers jumping in to say that Briahna Joy Gray is toxic. Saying, this is toxic. She is part of the problem. And then throughout the day, again, it began to evolve even further, going from, the tweet is in bad taste to saying that that it's toxic, and now beginning to kind of threaten her a little bit, saying that she's not going to be able to see career opportunities here. You can see we've both been in politics long enough to know that this person is putting herself in a very bad position for future opportunities. I hope she knows exactly what she's doing, because making unnecessary enemies is a fool's errand. Tiffany Cross also jumping in to say, attention young people hoping to pursue a career in political communications. Comm work requires thinking and strategy and foresight. And always uplifting the candidate. Trolling someone who isn't even an opponent, it's not really a thing, and this is damaging to the campaign. Don't do this. You'll notice here, I think she kind of incorrectly used the word troll. I'm not sure that she knows exactly what it means to troll, but whatever. And Joy Reid also jumping in here saying, I second this as a former campaign press secretary. So people are now saying that she's just bad at her job, that advocating for Medicare-for-All is, not part of her job description, I guess, because it's more about personality for them or something like that. And actually, I really like Briahna Joy Gray's response to this particular part of it here, saying, attention young people, don't ever put careerist ambitions in front of your principles. I was hired because I believe in what this movement is fighting for, and that commitment empowers me to say what's right and true rather than what can secure a network news paycheck. Really slamming her there. Now, this is actually a really, really good point, because it does seem like there's a lot of these kind of really careerist, really ambitious people who go into politics and don't really have any kind of clear ideology. They're more interested in poll testing, more interested in, finding out what's the popular opinion, then what's the opinion that I believe in, and then trying to fight for those issues. Because what's the big criticism that we always hear against Medicare-for-All? Like, the main thing that they really always use, the only thing that the actual piece of argument that they kind of use, they say, well, it's unpopular. They say, oh, well, people want to keep their private insurance. It's not an actual argument for the status quo. It's to say, oh, well, this is what people want. They want to keep their private insurance, not actually having any kind of argument about what's good, what's right, or what might be able to, better ensure protections for individuals. Instead, it's an argument from public opinion. Now, unfortunately, though, the left kind of in my opinion, and I've talked about this in some of my videos, I think the left sometimes falls for that and then responds with polling and arguments showing that, well, actually, if you look at these polls and how these polls are worded, actually Medicare-for-All is popular. Anyway, I don't want to sort of rehash that argument, but I do think that sometimes the left sort of falls victim to that kind of thing. But anyway, moving forward, I think that, you can really see Briahna Joy Gray really responding to this, in my opinion, quite well. Responding to Zerlina Maxwell's tweet here saying that, I wish folks were this angry about people dying because they are poor. And this is actually a really good point, because what's one of the points, what's the thing that neoliberals always talk about? They always talk about tone, rhetoric. How's your message, being sent across? And look, I'm not here to say that stuff isn't important. It is important in a democracy. It is important to, not be someone that just turns everybody off, even if you're 100% right, because then you're not going to be able to get the things that you actually believe in done. So to that extent, sure, I agree. But to sort of sacralize and to, make sacred the idea of tone and tenor, like, oh, how are you presenting yourself? To say that that is an end in and of itself it just shows your kind of ambitious nihilism, the kind of ideological nihilism of neoliberalism, right? I mean, I've talked about it on this channel before, but neoliberalism in many respects is the sort of position of politics, the viewpoint, which says that the market is natural, and the question of government is how much government do we want intervening into the market. And so as a result, right, so on the left, you want more government going in, and on the right, you want less government going in. That's a really naive view, first of all, but also notice the sort of implicit way in which you conceive of politicians then, right? If you think of government as a question of how much government you want going into the economy, and the economy is natural, then the question for you is a question of qualifications, right? You want the person who is most qualified. That's why neoliberals tend to fetishize, experience and, oh, who's the most qualified, right? Because the question is then the sort of role of a politician, the role of a statesman then is to manage the economy, right? That's the purpose of politics for a neoliberal in many ways. And so they end up sort of fetishizing this kind of tone and tenure. Do they, exude the right confidence? Do they look like the kind of manager that I want? The person who is going to properly manage the economy. Because guys, what you need to understand about neoliberalism is that it's essentially the belief, the view. Neoliberalism is the view that we should offload very important and critical political and moral questions to the market, right? If I can't make up a good way of dividing up and deciding how various resources should be allocated, we just offload those decisions to the market, because that way you don't actually have to risk your seat. It's right. Because think about it, guys. If you don't actually want to make a decision which is unpopular and, might be a risky position, right? What do? You offload it to the market, because that way, again, you don't have to take a risk actually to yourself. You just offload it to the market, and then when things don't go well, you just say, well, that's the way things went. I wish that it didn't get privatized, or excuse me, they'll say, well, I wish that, the market did things differently, and well, we need to go in with various regulations, and then they can sort of offload the blame by saying, well, I think the market should control it, but then we need to actually just regulate the market. It's an entire ideology which fetishizes qualifications, which fetishizes, tone and manners, and as opposed to talking about justice and saying, well, I think that it's just wrong that poor people could die. Anyway here, and also there was some genuinely just kind of racist stuff coming out. If it's not racist, it's definitely borderline racist, to say something like this. And, Briahna Joy Gray here having a really good response. If she thinks that sharing alt-right racist memes is going to make me come down from my position on Community, she's wrong. It's one of the best shows ever made. So that's because she's one of the actresses in the TV show Community, which I also like. I think that's a good show, but definitely very disappointed to see that coming from her. And also here, really good response here from Catherine saying, amazing that all these dim establishment people who represent a wing of politics being roundly rejected by young people at the polls are out here saying, you're never going to work in this town again type shit. Who with a soul would want to? And that's really a good point here, because, this viewpoint, which Briahna Joy Gray is expressing, Medicare-for-All, is clearly the position which young people are in favor of, which young people support. But they're turning around saying, well, if you advocate your position to someone in authority, advocate it to someone in power, well, then you're never going to be able to work in politics. You're never going to have any kind of career and advancement options, because that's exactly what they're saying to you. This is all about power, guys. It's not the fact that you actually have the position of Medicare for All. It's the fact that you have the position of Medicare for All and are actually willing to advocate for it, right? Because if you say, oh, I believe in Medicare for All, and then you don't actually fight for it, like Kamala Harris, who claims to support it, then you're not a threat to power. You're not a threat to corporations. But as soon as you start to say, oh, well, why do you take money from Wall Street? Why do you take money from, large multinational corporations? Then it's a personal attack. Then you're smearing someone without actually recognizing that, no, these are genuine criticisms of your actions. I think that it's wrong in principle to be taking money from Wall Street, taking money from large corporations, because it's a different conception of politics. But for neoliberals, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because if their goal is just to manage the market, then taking money from, various market actors, well, there's nothing wrong from that. There's nothing wrong in that, because that, in their mind, actually just helps them know better how markets should be regulated, right? Because the market's telling them how they should regulate them, essentially, right? So it ends up just being a complete mess. And Mehdi Hassan doing a really good response from Mehdi Hassan, as he always does, saying Bernie's press secretary suggesting to a sitting U.S. senator that cancer treatment, and not just COVID-19 treatment, should be free has generated far more outrage from liberals on Twitter than the fact that Biden's senior advisor offered free PR and legal advice to Harvey Weinstein. Great message, especially while we're in the middle of a situation where Joe Biden has been credibly accused of sexual assault and the media isn't talking about it at all. And by the way, this is about Anita Dunn, and Anita Dunn was also, by the way, if you watch my other videos, involved in the cover-up where Biden is attempting to cover up the sexual assault allegation. So anyway, I mean, I just wanted to show you guys that it's completely ridiculous and completely outrageous the way that neoliberals just freak out over tone and tenure when you're making a legitimate policy point, making a legitimate criticism. Because guys, notice, by the way, there was no substance in any of those responses. None of those responses actually dealt with the substance of the argument, dealt with the question of, well, okay, give me a genuine, like a legitimate distinction. Why is it the case that, it's okay to, it's not okay for COVID treatment to be free, but that it's okay for cancer treatment to, bankrupt people, right? No actual response, no actual arguments, just your tone was bad. It was inappropriate to call out a sitting U.S. senator. How dare you challenge power like that? How dare you? That's what they say to us, guys. And it's really disgusting. And by the way, it goes to the same thing that they always say to you, right? If you're a Bernie Sanders supporter and you tweet out snake emojis or you say anything that's improper, what do? They instead of actually dealing with your arguments, instead of actually listening to you, they just call you a Bernie bro. They just call you toxic. They say that, the way that you talk, the way that you think is toxic. How dare you go after Nancy Pelosi because Nancy Pelosi is bought by corporations? How dare you attack a woman, right? They call you sexist. They say that you're, racist as soon as you criticize a black person for taking money. As if those things were not legitimate policy criticisms, right? As if any of the, and they tell us, of course, that the Democratic Party and the left, the progressive left, that we want the same thing. We just can't actually do those things. And, they're just trying to tenor us. No, guys, it's completely ridiculous. And I actually think that this sort of dispute, which was really trending on Twitter, by the way, got like 30,000 people talking about it, something like that. So I think that it really sort of encapsulates that general point. So anyway, if you like the video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thanks.